And welcome back, students, to our next lesson in information hiding and encapsulation. We are now going to discuss private and public modifiers. Information hiding means that you separate the description of how to use a class from the implementation details, such as how the class methods are defined. This is done so that a programmer who uses the class does not need to know the implementation details of the class definition. The programmer can consider the details hidden since they do not need to look at them. Information hiding is a way of avoiding information overload. It keeps the information needed by the program within reasonable bounds, and this concept is also known as abstraction. So, pretty much in a nutshell, what you need to know about information hiding is the programmer, the person that's going to use your program, doesn't need to have access to every single method in your program because they don't need to use every single method in your program. Some of those methods are going to be for the program itself. So, encapsulation is our next thing. Now, encapsulation means to group software into a unit in such a way that it is easy to use because there's a well-defined, simple interface. Now, Java is nice that it has a way of officially hiding details of a class definition. And the way that we do this in Java is to hide those details, we simply mark them as private. And we've seen private before, we've also seen its counterpart public, and we're going to talk about those. But before we do, just really quickly talk about an API. Now, an API, you may know, stands for an Application Programming Interface. The API for a class is the description of how to use the class. If your class is well designed, using the encapsulation techniques we're going to discuss, then a programmer who uses your class needs only to read the API, which is in your documentation, and not the actual details of your code. So they should just be able to use your program, use whatever method calls that are available, rather than, oh, well, what's this definition for this, or what's the method I need to be able to do process X, or process Y, or process Z. They'll just be able to, oh, I just need to, let's say we're using the scanner class, I just need to do a keyboard.next or keyboard.nextInt. You don't need to know how that method is constructed. All right, I alluded to this earlier, but let's talk a little bit about those private and public modifiers. So let's compare instance variables first from the classes date first try and date second try. I know this is a little bit ago, but let's just talk about those. In the first class, date first try, the variables were prefaced by the modifier public. We had public int day, public int year. In the second class, those variables were prefaced by the modifier public. So like private int day, private int year. Recall that public means that there's no restrictions on where the instance variables can be used. Whereas I can use them in the main class, date first try. I could also technically use them into date first try demo. Private, on the other hand, means that the instance variable cannot be accessed by a name outside of that class definition. So with date second try, since I have private int day, if I tried to call what day was stored in date second try demo, I would have gotten an error. So let's talk a little bit more about this usage of private. The following would produce a compiler error if used in a program. Date second try date equals new date second try. Date.month equals January, date.day equals 1, date.year equals 2006. Okay, so this is kind of like that demo example I just talked about. Now, while any of the variable assignments above would trigger the error, so technically any of those like date.month, date.day, date.year would cause an error, the reason for this is due to the fact that each of the instance variables in date second try, so our primary class that we're looking at right now, are labeled as private. Let's look again at that same code now, but using our first class. Date first try date equals new date first try, date.month equals January, date.day equals 1, date.year equals 2006. This code will not produce an error because our variables of month, day, and year are public. All right, let's talk about a little different things between public and private. Now, generally speaking, it's considered to be good programming practice to make all your instance variables private. This is intended to simplify the task of the programmer using the class. You might think, well, it's easier if I can just use it public because then it's accessible anywhere. While it might be accessible anywhere, there's some complications you'll actually create by making everything public. Once you label an instance variable private, there is then no way to change its value nor to reference the instance variable in any other way except by using one of the methods belonging to the class. Right, so for example, if you created a object using your date second try class there, you could use any of those methods that belonged in date second try to get the values of, for example, day or month or year. Now note, even when an instance variable is private, you can still access it through the methods of the class, which is what I just talked about. The modifiers public and private before method definition also have similar meanings. If a method is labeled as public, then there are no restrictions on its usage. So you can use it in that class, you can use it outside the class. If the method is labeled as private, the method can only be used in the definition of another method of the same class. Any instance variable or method can be labeled public or private. However, good programming practices require that all instance variables be private, and most methods are public. So just remember, rule of thumb, instance variable, private. Method, generally public, but there are some exceptions. And the exceptions are this. A method is normally only private if it is a helping method in the definition of another method. So what that means is that inside of that class, so let's say date second try, the one we just looked at, had a method that would define something that another method would need, then that would be considered a helping method. And we'll see some helping methods in date fifth try today that we look at. So I just already alluded to it. Here's our another date try class. All right, in the course materials, we'll find date fifth try. Now, note all the instance variables are private and two of the methods are private. So let me just pull that up quick. So here's our variables. We have date and year. Here's month. And you'll notice that these three variables, our instance variables, are set to being private. The methods date OK and month string are private because they are helping methods. So I'm going to just kind of scroll here. Here's one of them right here, month string. And the other one was date OK. Right here. So here's our other one, which is a private Boolean. They're helping methods because what that means is that the user, when I actually go to, if I were to demo this class, I cannot call this date OK class. That's only called by this class right here, date fifth try. Date fifth try will call this. I'm not going to, as a user, call date OK. I'm going to call a toString. I can call get month, get year, get day. I can do any of those things, but I'm not going to call date OK. That Boolean method simply exists to check whether or not the date is in the correct format, which we'll talk about. Now, a user of the program cannot use either of these two methods, date OK or month string. This is an example of hidden information that need not concern a programmer using the class. And this is one of those things to talk about. You don't need to know if the date's OK or not. The program is going to handle that. Month string also has been changed from a public to a private class. It is just a helping method this time. So if we look here, here's our private string, month string. And you notice it's no longer public like it was in our, I believe, date fourth try even. It's over here as a private. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about date fifth try. You'll note that the class date fifth try uses the method date OK to make sure that any change to the instance variables make sense. As I mentioned previously, if you were paying attention, you'll notice that I said that the purpose of that method is to check that the date format is correct. Because the methods of the class use the method date OK to check for impossible dates, you cannot use any methods such as read input or set date to set the instance variables to become impossible dates. Pretty much what would happen if you attempted to do so, your program would end with an error. In fact, if you look in these here, with these methods and stuff, when I start looking at some of these, they start producing fatal errors. Right? They just do system exit. Now, no, the program did not check for impossible dates like February 31st, but it would be possible to check for this as well. So right now, the way this checks right here, when it looked at these date OKs here. So for example, the year, it's looking to see if that's between 1,900, or see, 9,999. The days check between 0 and 31. You could do a little bit of code rewriting to try and make it check for that, but as it stands right now, there's nothing really to kind of catch that. Now the methods date, OK, and equals each return a type Boolean. That means that they'll return a value that is either true or false and can be used as a Boolean expression in the if-else statement, a while loop, or other loop statements. This is illustrated really quickly by the following. If date OK, month, day, year, this dot month equals month string, month, this dot day equals day, this dot year equals year. Else, system.println fatal error, system.exit 0. Now note, although all the instance variables are private, a programmer using the class can still change or access the value of an instance variable using the methods to start with set or get. So if I look back at my code, for example, I have public void set year. This right here will access the instance variable year, and what that's going to do is it's going to set the value, right, if it's in that correct range that I want. So right here, that's where it changes it. Same thing here, set day, set month. Inside versus outside view, very thing to talk about here, because there is a significant difference between the inside view of the code and the outside view of the class. A date such as July 4th, 1776 is represented inside the class object as the string value July and the two int values 4 and 1776. But if a programmer using the same object class asks for a date using getMonth, getDay, and getYear, they're going to get the values 7, 4, and 1776. This is because from inside the class, month is a string, but outside is an integer. What that means is it's when you put that value in, you put it in as a string, but when the program processes it, it changes that value. So getMonth, it changes it to a integer. So for example, since we're looking at July, right here, it says else month equals in lowercase July, return 7. So it is now returned a integer value. All right, method order. All right, note, method definitions in the class need not be given in any particular order. So it is perfectly acceptable to use the definition of the method date OK after the definitions that use date OK. Instead, use whatever order makes the classes easiest to read. And what that means is that, for example, if I were to, for example, let's just say I'm going to switch around day, year, and month here. Okay, and I want it so that way month is first because I'm used to writing month, day, year. You could do that perfectly fine without it having any significant impact upon your code. Right now we have day, year, month. And the reason why that is because these two are ints and they're a little bit easier to work with. Whereas like this one, there's a lot of complicated steps that go into it because we have to do all the else if cases there. But I could theoretically just take this and put that first. All right, and that is the notes, folks.